Well, greetings everybody. Welcome once again to the Rec Poker Podcast, episode 85. And last week I mentioned that I was going to do more of a breakdown of my Vegas trip and my interview with Sarah Herring. I'm going to put that on hold another week. Life just kind of took me over this last week and I wasn't able to put together my kind of analysis of the week and some of the hands that I ran into. So I'm planning on doing that next week. We'll see how that goes. So this week instead, I'm going to bump up a interview that I did with poker pro and training coach Alec Torelli. And I think you're really going to enjoy this. So we're going to hear from our sponsor. And then when we come back from that, you will hear from the interview that I had with Alec Torelli. Running Aces Casino and Racetrack has the best poker room in Minnesota, featuring 24/7 promos on all cash poker games, including earning $2 per hour in comps, plus the most player-friendly tourney structures. Visit runaces.com for daily promotions and the tournament calendar. Running Aces Casino and Racetrack, the official sponsor of Rec Poker. Well, everybody, as promised, I am here with Alec Torelli, and Alec is joining us from Italy. Good morning, Alec.
Hey, good afternoon.
Good, exactly right. So now you're sort of a world traveler. I was looking at some of your stuff, and you're kind of just traveling the world doing the poker stuff, doing some speaking stuff. You're just kind of all over the place all the time.
Yeah, that's always been my thing. You know, one of the things that drew me to poker when I was 16 and 18 was that I could play events in all different parts of the world. And so I was as enthralled about the lifestyle that poker allowed me to live as I was about the game itself. And so for me, it was always about choosing amazing destinations that allowed poker that was in a place that I wanted to see as well. And this way I could, hit two birds with one stone. And a lot of the time, I would go for the poker, and if I could break even in an event and just pay for my vacation, that was a win for me. And I lived my life like that for many years. And then, I've still to some extent do that. I just go to cool places where there's poker and play when I can, but I try to make a lifestyle of it first and foremost.
So what are some of those coolest places that you visited that you're saying, man, I'll come back here as much as I can, or I highly recommend everybody checks this place out?
So I've been lucky. I've been to over 40 countries now, and a lot of them were for poker. But honestly, some of the coolest places I visited weren't poker places. And I know that might not be the favorite answer, but that's sort of my truth. And I think that also, it could be because when I wasn't playing poker, I had more time to explore those places. But also I think just objectively, places like the south of France in the spring, or Norway in the summer, or Bali, Indonesia in their winter, which is coincidentally our summer, were my favorite places to explore. And there were no poker in any of those places. But poker-wise, that's a good question. I think Melbourne, Australia is at the top of my list, especially because it's summer there. The hotel is incredible, and there's the tennis at the same place as the hotel. I'm an avid tennis fan, so that was incredible to be walking around the lobby and seeing, people that I look up to and other sports that are role models of mine. And then just to be there in Melbourne in the middle of summer was incredible. So I think that's, the prime location to play poker. Unfortunately, I haven't been there in many years, 5-6 years, but I loved it out there, and I actually loved it so much that I ended up living there. I stayed there for 9 months. So it was an incredible spot, and that's definitely on the top of my list.
Sounds awesome. So have you never been to Africa by any chance? I've been there 4 times. I do humanitarian work down there, and I always tell people, if you're able to travel places, go to Africa. Go on the Serengeti. Check that place out. It's unbelievable. Have you ever been to that continent?
That's incredible, and I would love to go there. It's on my bucket list. I just haven't been. It's an entire continent that I haven't explored, and gosh, the world's so big. I haven't even been to South America either, except for Costa Rica and Aruba. So there's 2 whole continents there that I've yet to explore. And most of the, all the countries I've been to are Europe and Asia, and Australia and the US, so I've only been to a few of the continents, even to say the least. And so I feel like, even though I've been to 40 some countries, I'm just getting started. There's just so much to see in totally different part of the world.
Yeah, 40 countries is just a good start, basically. So where do you?
Yeah, totally.
Is there a place that you actually call home then, or do you feel like you have a few homes around the world?
More the second one. It sort of depends on the year. So, um, you know, my early 20s, I was based largely in the US, in Vegas. And, my mid to late 20s, I was based largely in Macau, um, playing high stakes poker out there from 2012, 2016. And then the last year I've been in Italy, a bit more than other years, spending like 4 or 5 months a year out here. I've always spent a lot of time out here because I moved out here when I was 24, just because I have family roots that are Italian. I love the culture. I've always wanted to learn the language. It was high on my bucket list. Something that I wanted to do in my 20s was move to Italy and learn Italian. And I, serendipitously met my wife that trip. And she was actually teaching at the university where I was going to learn Italian. I walked into her office randomly one day, and that changed the trajectory of my life. I ended up, spending a lot more time in Italy. We spend time here every year with her and her family, and so we have a place here. And I live in Italy part time now, so that's crazy, sort of surreal experience. And so yeah, I spent some time in Italy, and then when I'm in the US, New York, Vegas, LA. My family's from California. Vegas is Vegas, and then we stay in New York some of the time too. So it just really depends on the year and like what's going on. Where poker takes me, where I have an event. It just, we try and just live one day at a time. And like, to be honest, I have plans next month, but only because I have a speaking obligation. But other than that, we usually don't plan more than a week or two ahead where we're going to be at any given time. And that's sort of what I love the most about being able to live a life with flexibility, is that it's, you don't know what's going to happen. It's always sort of exciting. So it just really depends.
Yeah, it's super fascinating to me, as my wife and I are both fourth generation in the same small town in East Central Minnesota. And so, we love that. We love the small town feel. We love all of those things. But it's so interesting to talk to people that are, man, just kind of living it 2 weeks at a time, and we'll see where we're going to live next year. That kind of thing. It's always super fascinating. So it sounds like a very interesting life. We could talk hours about that deal. But I kind of want to go back to the beginning of your poker career. I know that it's sort of well documented that you kind of fell in love with poker when you're like 16 or so, and then you went to SMU, and you ended up leaving SMU to pursue poker. Tell me a little bit about that journey, but more so, how did you know that, or maybe you didn't know, but how did you really decide that I'm going to pursue poker? And
sorry, you kind of cut out there. I heard you say, tell you more about the beginning of my journey as a poker player and how I knew that poker was right for me.
Yeah. So yeah, knowing that you kind of, your journey is pretty well documented, as far as at a pretty young age, you fell in love with poker. You decided to leave SMU to pursue poker. How did you kind of know that was going to be the path that you wanted to take, or how are you able to actually make that happen?
Well, I think knowing what you want to do is almost the easy part. Like, I think there's a lot of noise in society, and if you really like sit with your own silence and you listen to your heart and intuition, you almost always know what you actually want. You know what the right answer is. The hard part is that there's other voices in your head that are conflicting with what your true wants are. And that could be the voice of your parents, the voice of your teachers, the voice of your girlfriend, the voice of your friends, that all have their own ideas and opinions about what it is that you should do. And so with something like poker, it was like, I knew that I wanted to play poker. I knew that I wanted to give this a shot. I was 18 years old. I had saved up 30,000 or whatever it was at the time. And I thought I was good enough to do it. And I knew I wanted to give it a shot. It was just finding the courage to make my own desires speak louder than the opinions and judgment and criticism of everyone else around me that was telling me I couldn't do it, or that it was a stupid decision, or that I was crazy. And so that's really the game. It's most people know, like, if you ask them and they work a job they don't like or something, and you say, well, what is it that you want to do? They'll tell you. It's just, there's that friction in between what they actually want to do and taking action to do it. And that's where I think the magic happens. That's where the results happen. And for me, it was just about, silencing the noise around me and making sure that my inner voice spoke louder than everybody else's combined. And it wasn't like a completely frivolous decision, like, I'm just going to go out on a whim and just drop everything and play poker. It was like calculated. I had proven my success. I had made money. I was beating some of the biggest games online at the time. I had done well in some tournaments. I was, the best player in my social circle of friends. I was playing in 18-year-old casinos and winning there. So like I was having all this positive reinforcement and feedback from the test drive that I did. And I also weighed my pros and cons. I mean, I knew that, okay, the best case scenario is that I make it and I get to live my dream of traveling the world playing poker. I also remember reading a book by Phil Hellmuth when he said he dropped out of school when he was 18 and he had $20,000 saved. I was, 18 and had at least that saved as well. And I was like, well, if this is where the best in the world started, I'm in that same spot. Like, that's not to say I'm going to become that, but these are benchmarks I had that I was, receiving inputs and feedback from. And I was saying, okay, well, he took a shot then, maybe it's a reasonable time to do it. Right. Someone else did it before me. And then I evaluated my worst case scenario. It was like, okay, well, what happens if I fail? If I fail, I lose all my money and I'm right back at SMU. I'm 19 instead of 18. And I'm just 1 year behind all the people around me. Like, they're going to get a job at 22. I'm going to get a job at 23 or whatever it is. I'm going to start my career 1 year later. And so the worst case scenario wasn't that bad. I lost a year of my time, but I was rich in time. I wasn't rich in money, but I was rich in time. I was 18 years old. I mean, I had more time than everybody in the world. So I was like, I could afford to risk this time for the expense, for the potential of, pursuing my dream. And I did, and it paid off for me.
Yeah, and I think being able to do that at a young age, obviously you have far less, I don't want to say responsibilities, but in some ways, you didn't have
way less responsibility.
You didn't have a family. You didn't have some of those things where I think there's those of us who discovered poker later in life, even if we don't think we can become, what you became or what Phil became. This idea of kind of chasing your dream in general, whether it's poker or not, is much more difficult as you layer on those responsibilities. So for you at your young age to be able to have the maturity to kind of look at that, or have the counsel or whatever to say, best case, worst case, boy, the upside here has a lot more potential than the downside risk. Let's go for this. I think that's a great level of maturity, or you had great advisors around you at that young age.
Thank you. Actually, my mom just instilled a lot of confidence in me from a young age that I could be what I wanted to be. And if I worked hard, I could achieve my dreams. So that came from my mom that gave me that confidence. But at the time, and that was just, luck. I was just dealt that hand, right? Like, I didn't do anything to deserve that. I just got dealt a great influence in my life from a young age that instilled that confidence in me. But at the time, all the people around me were against, everyone that I told said I was crazy. So not a single person was like, oh, this is a great decision, you're going to crush it. Like, even if they thought I could win and they saw that I was good at poker, they just were like, okay, you're good at poker, but you can't just throw everything away. Or to them, throwing everything away was dropping out of school to pursue this frivolous sort of thing. And mind you, this was 2005 when there wasn't poker like there is today. Like, there wasn't like a massive community of young professionals that were on television, and so it was even more esoteric than it is today. And so, like I said, it just comes back to being dealt that great hand of how, my mom instilling that courage. But there are times in life when, like, there aren't people around you, but if you kind of listen to your gut and you really know what the right decision is, only you can know that. No one else can know that for you. And so ultimately, it's your opinion of what is right that matters the most. And I encourage people to listen to that for themselves.
That's fantastic. Yeah. And so when you think about, your start in poker and where you've gotten to today, and we'll talk a little bit about some of those things. Sure. Obviously, to get to the top of your profession, people need to work hard. It's always part of the deal. But do you consider yourself more or less a poker prodigy because at your young age you kind of just got it and things kind of clicked? Or was it a result of hard work, or was it a result of, you were always playing strategy games as a young kid? Or what do you kind of credit for you being able to kind of grab hold of this at a young age and actually, kind of make it work?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Just make sure I didn't cut out.
Yep.
Okay. So it's a marriage of all those things, really. Like, let's start. Okay, so there's always two sort of components, right? Two sort of like pillars of success. There's the hand you're dealt, and there's how you play the hand. Let's first talk about the hand I was dealt. I was, taught chess at a very young age. I studied chess, even though I was never very good, but I loved like strategy games and puzzle games. And so my dad taught me chess and played, chess with me when I was young. And I went to like some chess camps and stuff like that. So I was, prone to playing those games. And I also think I had like a natural, like, as much as you can, like I think I had a natural proclivity or affinity for poker. And I would always gamble as a kid. And I know that sounds weird, but like I was gambling on random events when I was 10. And an example of that would be betting on sports games, betting on Pogs, if you guys remember Pogs and like slammers and keenies and stuff like that. I would play with those. And we played for keeps. Like most people played for fun. Like I would win and lose, precious Pog sets like in my adolescence. And I would like, accumulate, like double my Pog net worth in a month or a week if I would play well. It's like we had like I got used to like fluctuations and winning and losing and like smart risk taking. I would play horse at the basketball courts. I have countless examples. I would bet who can hold their breath longer. I would bet who can swim to the other side of the pool faster. Like we would bet on numerous trivialities of life. And I would do that from a very young age. And I would always bet with people that were older than me. And I usually lost. And so I got very good at betting, even though I wasn't as like, and there's a big difference between 3 years when you're 10 and the other guy's 13. Like you're just drawing dead in so many physical activities like swimming fast or holding your breath or basketball. Like it's so hard to overcome that age gap when he has 30% more life than you, Mm-hmm. And so I remember one guy in particular that I would lose to all the time. And that just made me good at betting. And so like when it came time to play poker, I just had an affinity for that. Then let's talk. So that was the hand I was dealt to some extent. I don't know why I started betting at a young age. It just was like, it felt natural to me. It was just like what we did. Like I remember one time, like there was 3 minutes left in a hockey game and the team was down by 1. And my friend gave me like ridiculous odds that the team that was down by 1 would win. And I was like, okay, they're not a favorite to win, but he gave me like 25 to 1, like something ridiculous. And so I bet like $10 and I won like $250. I was like 10 years old, and the team came back and won. It was a miracle. And like, I thought it was a genius, but there was luck involved. But like, I just remember these moments where like, I just was building a bankroll at 12 and 13 and 14 that I would later use for poker. So then let's talk about like how I played the hand, right? That was the hand I was dealt. I was, a lot of luck involved to be around people that would bet with me and stuff like that. But in terms of the hand, how I played the hand and like what I did to capitalize, like I spent every waking free hour studying poker. And that's just the truth. Like from 16, even up until this day, I still study poker. But like there was a period where like I literally didn't put down my computer. And I mean that when I started to play online poker, like I didn't take days off of thinking about or obsessing about or studying or talking or reading or practicing poker from like when I discovered it until like 20. That was just like 4 straight years. And even after that, like I took a week off and then I went back for another like 4 years. Like I literally just everything poker. I like would have dreams where I'd see poker hands replaying in my mind because of the amount of waking hours I spent playing poker. And so like I would run equity calculations all the time. I would talk to who I thought were the best players in the world and I would learn from them and I would, study with them and we'd talk poker hands and I would play next to them and they'd watch me play and I'd watch them play. And, I just got to be like a sponge and absorb strategy from all the best players around in the world. And like that's how I played my hand to make sure that I could reach the top of the industry and stay there. And so it was easy in a way in that scenario because you're like a product of your environment. And so it was easy to get ahead of the curve being around those people and dedicating all of my time and effort and life to it. At 18, when I had nothing to do all day, every day, except play poker, I literally could play 60, 80 hours a week, which I did. I'm sure I played I'm sure I spent, I don't want to say played poker because I studied and talked about it as well and read, but I'm sure I spent 60 plus hours a week for years, probably a decade.
So sort of the perfect storm. You got dealt pocket aces, and you flopped quad with them, and somebody had a flush draw or whatever it is. But sort of the perfect
and
storm
so
where
it's a combination of those things. Like I got dealt a great hand, and I think I played my hand the best way possible.
And you played it well.
And
yeah,
that's,
I think
that's it.
One of the things I talk about quite a bit is this idea of passion, and as somebody who sort of always likes to get involved in new things, one of the questions that I've been asking myself and asking others is, when you have a passion, can you discern if it's actually, are you passionate about the core thing, or are you passionate about the idea of something? And I think one of the questions that I get quite a bit as a host of the podcast, and people want to know is, how do I become a pro poker player, or those sorts of things? And of course, I'm not one, so it's hard for me to discern that. But I think a lot of us, or a lot of people, are passionate about the idea of becoming a pro player, versus really passionate about playing poker in the way that you're talking about. And I think, what I hear in you is, man, it was just the passion for the game was just there. It didn't start with the passion for the idea of becoming pro. It was just passion for the game. And I think that's where a lot of those things really come from, is that root core passion.
Yeah, you have to not have money be your primary drive. And I feel like half the people that say they want to be pros have already lost, because they're in it for the money, and you're only going to be so good if you're in it for the money. I always said, I don't care about winning the money. I just want to win the main event. Or I don't care about, the money. That's just a way of keeping score. I want to be rich because being rich means I'm a good player, not because I want to buy shit. Mm-hmm. That was always my truth. I was like, if we play for goldfish, I want to be fat. I didn't care. Money was just what we used. I mean, that was the way we kept scoring basketball. It was points and wins, and we had dollars. That's how I saw it. I didn't see money as any other way except a tool to allow me to reach the highest levels in my profession. And so I was obsessed with the merit of the game. And that's always what drove me to get better and better. And if you're not if you're questioning, listening to this right now, and you're unsure, you're not driven by the merit of the game as much as I think you need to be in order to be a professional in 2018. So if there's any doubt, then that doubt should speak loudly, because there shouldn't be doubt. It's kind of like you're debating on whether or not to marry this woman. You shouldn't really be debating. It should just be an obvious yes. And the fact that there's debate alone means it's probably not right. I didn't write out a list of pros and cons when I asked my wife to marry me. It was just obviously the right decision. And so in the same way, I feel like major events in your life are like that, where you're going to live, who you're going to marry, what you want to do with your life. It's just got to feel right. And I don't know how else to say it. It just has to be the most obvious, in front of your face type of thing, that there is no other option. You couldn't imagine another reality. And if that's exactly not your truth, you shouldn't be playing poker professionally, in my opinion. It's too much work. It's way too hard to make an easy living doing it. And there's so many other things that you could do. And I would encourage people to find the thing that they feel the most excited about, and make sure you're in it for the right reasons.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's exactly what I was going to say. You couldn't imagine life without your wife, or you couldn't imagine life without poker, or you couldn't imagine life without it involving Italy, or whatever it is. I think that's how you can really help hone in on what your passions are. So let's shift gears. We only have a limited amount of time, and this is fantastic. I've got a lot of connection with you. I'd love to talk more about a lot of what you just shared, and I know you do some speaking.
Awesome, thank you.
You do some speaking about that, so I'm super intrigued by that. But let's shift gears and get a little bit more into the actual poker side of it. I know, sure, a lot of our listeners are looking for some of those tips, and our primary listeners are those that are recreational players looking to move up in stakes, and wherever those are. Some of them are are playing at the bar, playing at home games, wanting to move to the casino, and some are playing the $280 tournaments. They want to play the 1100s, and some are playing the 1100s, want to play the 10,000s. And so it's always about, how do we get to that next level? And what I want to start with with you is, as you're playing, what are still some of those key mistakes that you're seeing? If you were to say, you recognize all these mistakes, you sort of categorize them. What are the biggest mistakes that you still see people playing?
So the biggest mistake that I see people make, and this has been true, I made a video about this 5 years ago. I think 4 or 5 years ago, and it's still as relevant today, is that people just play too many hands. And this is a mistake that pros and amateurs make alike, is that they just play too many hands. They're too loose. They play too many hands pre-flop. They play too many hands on the flop, too many hands on the turn, call too much on the river. Like, they're just too loose. And so that's the biggest mistake that I see day in and day out. It's mainly, it starts with pre-flop. And if you think about, the rest of every decision you make, no decision you make on the turn or the river or the flop can happen unless you make the decision pre-flop. And that's why I like to encourage people to think about their hands like a funnel. It starts very wide at the top and it gets narrower as the hand progresses. And so at the top of the funnel is pre-flop, and you could play a lot of hands pre-flop. And as you move down the hand on the flop, the turn, and the river, I created this idea of a hand range funnel, because every time you take a different action, your hand range, your types of hands that you have or your opponent has, gets narrower. It can never get wider. You can never have a hand on the river that you don't have pre-flop. So pre-flop, you play a lot of hands, or not a lot of hands, you play the most amount of hands. And as you progress through the hand, your types of hands you should play get smaller and smaller. And so the biggest mistake I see is that people's funnels are too wide. They just play too many hands in too many situations. And that's why at Conscious Poker, we've made content available for free for people to download that helps them decide what hands to play from which position and how to adjust that strategy to your own situation based on the types of games you're in, whether you're in a cash game, whether you're in a tournament, whether you're deep stacked, whether you're short stacked, whether you're in position or out of position. It's a guide and hand range charts that people can download for free at consciouspoker.com that gives them that information. And then we also have a hand range funnel that allows people to basically understand how to hand read and how to think through putting their opponents on hands and how to understand what their opponents are likely to have in any given situation. And these are the mistakes that I see the most often. And that's why we created free content to make it available to people, because I got asked that question like 400 times. What's the one thing I could do to improve, or where should I spend? I'm a busy guy. Everybody's busy. I respect everyone's time. I know that everyone only has a limited amount of time to spend on poker. So my whole thing was, where's the 80-20 approach? What is the 1 or 2 or 3 things people can do that's going to give them 80% of the impact with 20% of the results? And that formula is really closer to 90-10. And so that's what I believe is what I'm seeing the most often in my coaching, when I'm talking to readers and students and clients, and when I'm playing in the field, even at the higher levels, or when I'm coaching, playing some 5-10 or whatever, 2-5, whatever it is. I'm seeing that all the time, repeatedly, day in and day out. And so that's why we make content available for free about that. And that's where I always go back to, and I kind of start there as the foundation for the 1 or 2 things people can do to improve.
Oh, so good. Let me follow up on that with a question about motivation, if I can. I'm curious what you think the motivation is for people playing too many hands. Is it they are just overvaluing hands that don't have as much value as they think? Are they bored? Are they regretting that, boy, last hand I didn't play my 4-8 and I would have flopped a full house? I mean, what do you think is that motivation, or why do you think people are playing too many hands?
Patience, man. I mean, I think the biggest reason when you get to the root cause of why someone makes a decision, it's patience. A lot of people actually know that they shouldn't play a hand. Like, when you ask them, why'd you play that hand? They're like, well, I normally don't, but insert BS excuse here.
But I haven't had a hand I haven't had anything over a jack in the last hour.
Yeah, like, it's the best hand I got in 2 hours. Like, right. So does that make it profitable? Like, so like, what? Like, there's just all this sort of rationale. And like, when I play with my clients, like at the table, I'll be like, playing with them, and then afterwards we'll review the session, and I'll be like, so let's talk about that hand, the Jack 7 suited. Why were you in there pre-flop with? Like, they're like, oh, I got unlucky with this hand on the river, or, oh, like that hand was standard. I'm like, well, let's go back to pre-flop. Why did you decide to call the raise with that? And they're like, what is the best hand I got, or whatever. I don't normally play. But like, that's sort of like, I don't normally play it. It was just this one time. Like if I had $1 for every time someone said that, I just wouldn't play poker anymore. I would just, take dollars from people that said that. So it's like you see that stuff so often, and I think it's just patience. Like some people don't know. So then there's the other side of the coin, which is that some people just genuinely overvalue hands. They actually, think that a certain hand is better than it is. And so that's why we made those pre-flop charts available to people, because then they could actually have all the information where they can say, okay, these are the hands I should play in each position, commit those to memory like you do a multiplication chart, and then there's really no excuse about the information. But even with that information, when people have it, they're still sometimes prone to playing hands they shouldn't, and that's just a patience and a discipline thing. And I think people get caught up in live poker with this idea that they should be stimulated every minute, like they're there for entertainment. And poker, frankly, when it's played correctly in a live environment, is rather boring, because you're going to fold 90% of the time. Like you're going to literally play 2 hands an hour, 3 hands an hour. And that's boring. Like, what are you doing the other 55 minutes? You're like watching what other people do, waiting for your opportunity, setting up your next move, learning information, making reads, and not getting distracted on your technology. Like it's boring. That's why everybody's on their phone when you see people play poker, because they want to be stimulated, and a way to become stimulated instantly and have that instant gratification is to play a hand that you shouldn't play. And so I think it's about going into the game with a different mindset. Like when I go to the poker table, I don't expect to be entertained. I expect to be, work on my patience as a meditation, because that's what it is for me. Poker is just like a daily meditation of patience. And I go in with that mindset, because that's the reality that I'm going to experience if I'm going to play well.
Oh, it's so good. Yeah, it's so good. And it's sort of this idea of either the meditation side or saying I'm going to be stimulated by trying to get reads on people, or trying to do a funneling hand range. Like I know you talk about funneling, and maybe those are the things, rather than I'm going to look for my engagement from the action.
Yeah, totally.
Oh, that's really good. So let me shotgun a few things at you. I'm just going to throw out a couple of phrases here, and just kind of curious what your take is on this. If I were to mention GTO versus exploitative play. Oh, did I lose you there, Alec?
Yeah. So if you were to mention GTO, what would I say?
Just kind of give me some shotgun responses to this. There's always people talking about GTO versus exploitative play. What's your take on that argument?
Look, I use both. Like, at the highest levels, you need a lot of GTO. It's really important. More percentage of the people you're playing against are going to be players with whom you have to adopt the GTO strategy, because they're playing so well that you're not really going to be exploiting them. You're not just going to raise pre-flop, c-bet the flop, and exploit them. A lot of the people listening, though, playing in small stakes games might only have 1 or 2 players at the table with whom GTO will apply. The rest of the players, and also GTO is on a sliding scale where it might apply against everybody in 10% of the time. But the other 80, 90, 50, 70, 80% of the time, whatever it is, you're going to be playing exploitative poker, because they're not going to be playing balanced enough that you have to worry about GTO. For example, on the flop, when you c-bet, you have to think about GTO. You can't just c-bet 100% of flops, otherwise you're going to be unbalanced. You need to start balancing your range when you're c-betting flops, because people have adjusted. Poker has gotten more difficult 2018. You can't just raise pre-flop, c-bet the flop, and expect to win every pot like you could in 2005. So that's a scenario where it matters, and it matters against a lot of players. It matters against an increasing number of the player pool. Situations where you're check raise bluffing the river, like GTO doesn't matter as much, because people aren't balanced there. You're calling a check raise all in on the river. People aren't having balanced ranges. They're way unbalanced. And so you shouldn't be hero calling with a balanced range to protect your GTO strategy, because your opponent isn't adjusting to that. He's just playing his hand in that spot. For example, it's not, there's no perfect example, but there are certain situations where people just don't have balanced ranges, and you shouldn't either. And so to win the most money, you're going to want to exploit them. So I think I don't want to say it's overrated. It's very important. I think we've come a little bit too far, at least in the mainstream community now, in terms of GTO. And it makes sense because the best players are talking about it so much because they're using it at the highest levels. And then what you have happen is people playing 1-3 at the win, thinking they need to play GTO all the time. And they're like, oh, well, I called because I had to. I'm at the top of my range. So they give some nonsensical excuse when they're playing against a belligerent tourist who's never thinking about anything other than his own 2 cards. You don't need to worry about GTO, but people take it a little bit too far, in my opinion. So I would encourage people to really use like common sense and judgment, like when they're playing against which players they need to use GTO and in which situations, and then apply the strategy that is best fitting for that moment. And you want to be continually adjusting to figure out what's the best strategy to apply in real time.
Really good. All right, let me shift gears.
That wasn't a shotgun answer, by the way. I'm sorry for that.
No, that's fine. Actually, it was great. It's phenomenal. And I think that's part of what we're learning is, GTO is more optimal when you're playing against people that are also playing GTO. And I think you can lose a lot of value by playing GTO against people that you should be playing an exploitive approach toward. If we're shifting gears here a little bit, on the podcast, we've talked about, and we've had guests that have argued for never open limping, and we've had guests that have argued for, there's a time and a place for having an open limping strategy. Curious your take on that deal.
So open limping, I just want to be clear what we're talking about. Yep. You're talking about the first one in the pot or limping behind other people? Because I think it's different.
First one to voluntarily put chips in the pot. We've heard it said you should never be, if you're the first one to put chips in voluntarily, it should always be either a fold or a raise. But others have said no. There's a good argument for being the first one to put chips in the pot and actually limping and having a strategy.
Yeah, I mean, you could make a winning strategy out of both, right? Like the default play is just always raise or fold. That's sort of like always correct, I guess, from like in terms of what a GTO robot would do. He would never open limp. He would just play a range that allows him to only raise or fold and condense his range appropriately. That doesn't mean that you can't profitably limp. It just means that the reason why limping is generally not profitable is because people do it incorrectly. They raise with their strong hands and they limp with their garbage hands. So when they limp, they never have anything. And when they're faced with a raise from someone behind them, now they're suddenly either limp folding or limp calling out of position with a garbage hand, both of which are losing plays. Mm-hmm. If you construct a balanced limping range, or you limp with a reason that is better than just, I have 8-5 suited and I want to play this hand. But if you limp for a deeper reason, for example, you are not likely to get raised behind you. You have a hand that plays better in a limped pot, but not necessarily in a raised pot, maybe something like, I don't know, Jack 9 of diamonds or something, or pocket 5s, and you're really deep and you're not likely to get raised, and you want to play a multi-way pot with someone, or pocket 6s maybe, and someone has smaller pairs. Like you could find cases for limping where you're not going to get outplayed and you're going to outplay other people, and you could potentially win a big pot just if you play well post flop as well. So it's, your ability to limp also depends on how good you are post flop, and you have to be pretty, good at navigating the terrain post flop in order to profitably limp pre flop, because you're going to be playing a lot more post flop poker in limped pots. So you have to be able to win pots creatively without hands and good at hand reading to be able to profitably limp regardless of your range. So it's a multifaceted sort of approach. And I think people just sort of, where it gets misunderstood and where people do it badly is they just play limping poker on level 1, where, like I said, they're limping with weak hands and raising with good hands. And that makes them very exploitable to anyone that's paying attention.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, shifting to bet sizing post flop, and we can talk a lot about when you should continuation bet and when not. But let's assume that you opened a pot and you got called, and then assume that you are going to continuation bet for whatever reason.
Yes,
we've had different perspectives on the size of that continuation bet in terms of some would argue, make us small, make it in that 30 to 35% range, and try to be consistent with that. Some would say, make a bigger, maybe a 2/3 pot and be consistent with that. And then others have argued, there's a lot of factors, it's texture of the board. It's a lot of those things. It's type of player again. It's size of stack, that really, it's okay to vary your bet. You don't have to be consistent.
So let's talk about the different factors here. So the first thing is, from a GTO standpoint, you're going to want to be c-betting different sizes on different textured boards. An ace-7 deuce rainbow board warrants a different c-bet size than something like a 9-8-6 two flush draw board. So boards that have drier textures can warrant smaller c-bets because ranges are more polar. In other words, your equity is going to be either way ahead or way behind on an ace-7 deuce board. If you have ace-king, you're either going to be crushing your opponent or he's going to have you crushed if he has you beat. So you don't really need to c-bet that big, and it protects your range and allows you to bet with more of your range when you c-bet smaller, which is generally a good thing. That's why people are c-betting a lot smaller, is because it allows them to bluff more profitably with more of their range. More of their range can bet when they bet smaller. So that's generally a good strategy. But on wetter board textures or textures where the equities are closer or your opponent's going to float more often, you want to probably be c-betting bigger to cut down on his implied odds. And you want to be c-betting less often on boards like Jack 10-8. You're not going to be able to c-bet as much of your range on that board. So when you do bet, you're going to want to bet bigger. Then there is analyzing it from an exploitative standpoint, which is, what are you trying to accomplish? What types of hands is your opponent going to call with? Is he going to call you narrow on the flop? Is he going to float on the flop? What do you think he has? Is he the type of player that's going to call you down light? Do you want to build a pot and get it all in by the turn of the river? So then there's all the exploitative factors to consider, and you basically want to look for where the exploitative circle and the game theory circle sort of intersect or overlap, and try and make that decision there. So for example, if I am trying to trap my opponent and hang him and keep him in the pot, and that tells me to bet small, and at the same time I want to balance my range because I'm playing against a good player and I want to keep my range wider, and that tells me to bet small, then I'm going to bet small on a textured board like ace-7 deuce. So you're kind of trying to look for multiple different reasons to do the same thing, and that's generally the area, the direction I go. But I wish there was a simpler answer. We're playing chess, not checkers. There is no one size fits all, so you can't really answer questions of this nature in any other way than a long form answer of saying it depends. You can't really, if there was a one size fits all answer, we'd be playing checkers, so that's just something to always keep in mind.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate your insight because, we hear a lot on the show. We hear a lot on the show. We hear, it depends. And I think, which of course it does. But one of the things that we're trying to dig into as recreational players is understanding more about it depends based on what, So I think, your answer was great because it gives us some parameters. Okay, I know it depends, but help me know what are those factors that it really depends on. And so that was a good help in that way. I just want to have one more question for you, and then we can close up. I know we're running out of time, but I'm curious what you would consider now at this stage in your life and your poker career. What is your biggest edge at the table?
That I really understand people and what they're likely to do in any given situation. I'm just really good at, everybody has their thing, right? So if you watch tennis, basketball, what is everyone good at? Everyone's good at something. There's centers, there's forwards, there's guards, and then everybody within those fields, right? Within the center, forward, guard, everybody has a different sort of skill set. Some people are bigger, some people are faster, some people are dribble better, some people shoot better, some people pass better, right? And so if I look at myself at the poker table, I have many of shortcomings like anybody. But where I shine is that I'm really good at understanding what people are likely to do in any given situation and understand the psychology of how a person is thinking and what they're thinking against me. And second is that I really take the mental game to the highest level and I do everything I can to be in the best shape possible, physically and mentally, to play my A game all the time, so that I'm always like in peak mental condition to perform A game level poker. And that allows me to concentrate for 12, 24 hours at a time when I need to, and be at my A game in the 15th hour when everybody else is tired. I think I'm making very high level decisions. And I work extremely hard on that. So those are my edges at the table. And that's where, I think people need to bet on their strengths. And so I've really doubled down on that throughout the years and gone even more in depth into maintaining and gaining and pursuing my edges.
Oh, that's great stuff. Well, let's wrap up. Tell us a little bit more about consciouspoker.com, as well as some of your speaking stuff and how people can connect with you, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, or whatever.
So for the poker stuff, like if you want the poker strategy, head over to consciouspoker.com. We have awesome free content, tons of blogs. I wrote most of them myself. And there's like a 12-page guide on cash game poker strategy or a 10-page guide on tournament poker strategy. It's all free. And it's great stuff. It's like beginner, intermediate, advanced, expert. There's free downloads. There's free guides. There's our pre-flop charts, our hand reading system. We have push-fold charts for people that want to play tournaments, all the way up to 15 big blinds. Totally solve the poker game for them that want to just memorize, basic tournament strategy, pre-flop strategy. So there's so much content there. And if you subscribe, you'll get some awesome content as well that's totally free. If you want that next level, we have a pro membership program, which includes monthly group coaching, a Slack group moderated by myself and a conscious poker coach, and you get priority access to submitting your hands to everybody in the community as well as myself to review them. And then we have, video members area where we have weekly training strategy videos that are some of my best content put out every week, where I walk people through my exact decision-making process. So that's some awesome content we have that are, is very accessible to everyone. It's affordable and free or very affordable. And then if they want to get in touch with me, like, all the Conscious Poker, we have our social media. But if you want to get in touch with me personally, I'm at Alec Torelli everywhere. Like on Instagram, I'm very active, Twitter, Facebook, like wherever. So I'm very active. I read all my messages and I read all my emails and I try to respond to all my comments. So definitely get in touch with me. Like I'd say Instagram or Twitter is probably the best place. And I'm looking forward to meeting you guys and connecting. And thanks for your time today. And I appreciate you guys listening and hearing my story. And I look forward to meeting you guys, even if it's just virtually.
Yeah, well, thanks, Alec. I mean, I'd loved having you on, and hopefully you'll come back on in the future as we talk about all the bracelets you win and all the big cash games that you won and all of those things.
You got it. Thanks for having me.
Any final words of wisdom to the folks out there?
Follow your heart.
Love it. All right. Thanks, Alec.
Thanks for your time. Cheers, guys.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Alec. I appreciate you taking the time. Good insights, good stuff there. Hey, if you want to start wearing some Rec Poker merchandise, we got a lot of options for you. There's no formal agreement. We're just asking people that, hey, if you like the podcast, if you want to help us spread the news about what we're doing and be sort of a brand ambassador for us, we'd love to have you. You could either get some adhesive patches or some sew-on patches, or now we actually have some merchandise available. We've got shirts, we got hats, we got sweatshirts, some Raglan shirts as well. All of them look really good. I've worn them myself several times, and I love the feel. I think they look really good. You can find those at floptheworld.com/recpoker, or just go to floptheworld.com and you can see that we've got a section there dedicated to Rec Poker stuff. So check that out as well. Again, if you take your picture of yourself playing a tournament in one of the, either with the patch or the merch, we'll mention you on air. If you get in a winner's photo, post that on Twitter, tag me so I'm aware of it, and you'll get entered into a drawing to win $50. We do that once a quarter, and we'll mention you on air as well. So help us spread the word about what we're doing. Also, if you have input, if you have suggestions, feedback, good, bad, ugly, whatever, let me know. We don't know what you're thinking unless you tell us, so that would be greatly appreciated. You can do that through Twitter at RecPoker, the Facebook group RecPoker, or email me directly, stevefredlund@gmail.com. And if you have other ideas for hands that you want us to break down or for interviews you want us to do, please shoot me those as well. So with that, thanks to Running Aces for sponsoring the show. Thanks to you for listening. and good luck on the felt.